Good evening and welcome to Old Romans Unscripted, episode 23. Would you believe? Episode 23. So I'm just waiting for my colleague to join me, which hopefully he will any moment soon. But this, of course, is our current affairs program. So tonight we're going to discuss some church headlines of the past week, give our thoughts and opinions on them. Feel free to share yours in the comments, and then we'll perhaps reflect too on the lives of the saints being commemorated at this present time, who of course may be able to give us some insight as to how we as Christians might respond or might react to the circumstances and events that are going on. So I've just heard from Bishop Nioclas. He's having some technical difficulty setting himself up. So I hope that he will join us presently. Meanwhile, perhaps I can just draw attention to. This is a little bit of an advert. I can just draw attention to a vocations conference on priesthood and religious life, and an invitation for expressions of interest. If anyone has an interest in the priesthood or the religious life within the old Roman tradition, they are cordially invited to register their expression of interest at www.celsi.org. I'm delighted to say that we've had such interest that actually it's likely that at least two events are going to have to be held, if not possibly three. So if you know anyone who is discerning their vocation at the present time, who may be interested, then please direct them to www.celsi.org, and they can register and express their interest and find out more information about that event there. Okay, otherwise, of course, some of you will know that I've been away. Currently, I'm strictly speaking in quarantine. I arrived back from a visitation to France on Tuesday and am now required by UK law to be in quarantine for 14 days. This has caused a little disruption to my usual routine, and so I'd like to express here publicly my personal thanks to Father Thomas Gerke, our Franciscan friend in Chicago, who very generously has been broadcasting his daily masses both while I was away and also has, bless him, promised to do so while I'm in quarantine, because I can't get to the chapel from here to broadcast mass. So of your charity, and particularly, of course, if you rely upon the broadcast daily mass, you can still find it in the usual places. I'm sharing it every day, live from the friary, and I know Father Thomas would appreciate your support at the same time. So do avail yourselves of that broadcast. And next week, normal broadcasting resumes, however, with some new programs. So on Monday evenings, whereas before we had our Old Roman Vocation series, we begin this Monday our new series, Saints Alive. And this will be a program that will explore each episode one or two saints, but we'll go into a little bit of detail about their lives and about the situations and the circumstances in which they lived, because so often our appreciation of the saints is just from their beautifully crafted hagiographies, or indeed from icons, statues, etc. And we forget, perhaps, that they were ordinary human beings like you and I, but who were able to accomplish extraordinary things by God's grace. But the point is that they lived, they ate and drank, and they went to the loo and had to shave and so on and so forth, just like you and I. And that sometimes is an element, their humanity, we might say, that we forget about simply because we're so used to thinking of them or seeing them in their glorious, sanctified portrayal in iconography. So that begins on Monday, Saints Alive. And on Wednesday, our late night catechism will continue. We're continuing with our reflections on the Passions. And then on Friday, a new series, Contra Mundum. So Friday Night Live, I'm afraid, is that's finished, or at least that series has finished, and quite probably will return in the late autumn or in winter. But meanwhile, Contra Mundum is a series that will discuss particularly topical matters of interest, and sort of really go into some detail as to how, as Christians, we ought to respond. So that's Contra Mundum. That begins next Friday. But you perhaps will be relieved to know that every Saturday, of course, we will continue with our Unscripted. And I'm delighted to say that Bishop Nioclas has sorted out his technology and is with us. So without further ado.
Hello there.
Hello, Bishop Kelly. Peace be with you.
Peace be with you. Yes.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Things with you?
Excellent. Yes, not bad. Thank you. Yes.
Refreshed.
Sort of. Sort of. Thereby hang a tale. I love going away. I love visiting. I love going away. I love visiting. I love visiting friends. I love visiting our faithful. But I hate traveling. I'm not keen on traveling. I think it's the whole rigmarole of having to pack and move. We're of a generation, aren't we, that when we were children, by now, according to the sci-fi programs of our day, we should have been able to beam me up Scotty like they were on Star Trek.
Right.
But technological innovation seems to be a bit slow in that regard, much to my chagrin, because I'd rather just like to get to where I'm going.
Yeah.
That said, of course, I do famously sleep anywhere, and I'm quite good at getting onto a plane and just passing out until we land. But it's the whole rigmarole of packing and getting from home to the airport or whatever. I just find all that distressing.
I'm the opposite. So, I'm the opposite, actually. I don't mind packing. A little obsessive about it. I could just go to the airport and spend 2 weeks there. I love airports. They're fascinating people, great people watching. You see all sorts go through and come and go. But I don't sleep well in my destination. It takes me 2 or 3 nights, whether it's jet lag or the strange bed or whatever it is. It takes me a while to settle in. I'm just getting settled when I have to travel back. So it's anyway.
Well, now you see, that's why my ability to sleep anywhere mobile is
pretty good.
Is useful, because I generally arrive wherever I'm going. I generally arrive feeling fairly refreshed. But and as you know, I'm something of an insomniac anyway. Yeah, I never know whether it's jet lag or not, but wherever I arrive, I can stay up usually quite late.
Good for you.
Well, yeah, it's good for me, not necessarily always good for my hosts, of course. which you have been one more than once. So,
well,
will you go to bed now?
Once you know where the kettle is and the tea, you're fine.
Well, that's it. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, and I do. So how were things while I was away? Because of course we've missed an episode because I wasn't able to host it. So how have your 2 weeks been?
Things are all good here, just sort of rolling along. And in the United States, they like to call these the dog days of summer. As summer draws to a close, they get slower and hotter and shorter. So it's been good. It's sort of the typical winding down of the summer. The crickets are chirping, the cicadas are screeching at night, and the air conditioners are humming, and
Yes.
But you do feel that change is in the air. We're starting to move towards the change, and that's good too. I mean, of course, we recreate that liturgically, and it's as a child you over anticipate, right? Of course, the famous thing is that you can't wait for Christmas to come quick enough, and you can't wait for summer to come quick enough to get off school and all of that. But I think as an adult, you grow into the seasons, and they happen and you're ready for them at the right time. So while still enjoying summer as I am, I'm ready for the change. I'm ready for those leaves to start changing and crisp autumn nights to come in, and they're about a month away, so that won't be too long. So
yes, there was I don't know if you may whether you may have come across it. There used to be a school hymn book that was very popular many years ago called "Come and Praise," but there was a song, I'd say, rather than a hymn, but a song in there. It was a book written specifically for school assemblies, but there was a song in there called "Autumn Days." Which was always one of my personal favourites. Autumn days when the grass is jewelled and the silk inside a chestnut shell, jet planes meeting in the air to be refuelled, and the things I love so well. So I mustn't forget to be grateful or thankful. I mustn't forget. But there's a wonderful line in there about the smell of bacon as I fasten up my laces. But it's sort of described. September mornings, with a fresh new school term and a fresh new school uniform and new shoes, and those sort of and those that autumnal feeling. Did you like Ready Breck?
Sorry, say again?
Did you like Ready Breck?
I did actually like Ready Breck.
Did you like Ready Breck?
I never had the glow around me that was promised from dads, but it's that sort of nuclear look. I did like Ready Breck. I preferred it much more to porridge, which I wasn't a fan of. I like porridge now, but as a kid, I was not too fond of it. My father liked the Scots way of doing it, which was salt rather than sugar.
Oh yes.
Which was anyway.
I just wonder because I remember those adverts with the people walking around with the orange glow around them. Now of course we strive to glow with another kind of radiancy.
Right.
Not sure how well we're doing with that either.
Right. Still not happening.
I think the odor of sanctity comes first. Anyway, let's look at this week's church headlines. So I think we'll start sort of easy.
And I haven't been keeping up this week, to be honest.
No, to be honest, and with being away and then coming back, I've not been, wholly on top of things. But one of the things, of course, this week that caught my attention. Does that work? Is this news that another former Byzantine church in Turkey is to be reconverted into a mosque. Now, I think it's important to say that when they say reconverted into a mosque, what they're actually talking about is the church in Korah, 4th century church that had always been a church until the 16th century in the Ottoman Empire, when it was then converted to a mosque until I think it was 1940 something, when it was then converted to a museum. Now, when it was previously converted into a mosque, the beautiful icons, etc., were washed over. But when it reopened as a museum, they scraped all of that away, and the icons were revealed. Now, of course, there is talk, just as there was really Hagia Sophia, of concerns that again these wonderful icons are going to be covered over. I'll just quickly share a few pictures for people to get an idea of what we're talking about. So this is the exterior of the building itself. As you can see, quite Roman Byzantine architecture. Here is a picture of the main nave. There it is again. Glass there, of course, glass panels for the museum. And just look at the dome there. That's just incredible. And that of course, there is an intersection of arches and domes. Phenomenal. Just incredible. So apparently, all of that is going to be covered over, and it'll cease to be a museum and will be used as a mosque.
So they're going to cover it over again, because apparently in Hagia Sophia there's some sort of contraption with cloths and coverings or something.
Yeah, they've used sort of curtains, as it were. Although apparently somebody died trying to put these curtains up. Somebody fell off the scaffolding. In fact, the muezzin, so the chap who sings the call to prayer, actually died of a heart attack the Sunday after the first Friday prayers. So there's all sorts of spooky.
Do they own a house in Highclere?
Sorry?
Do they own a house at Highclere?
Now you see, now what do you think? I mean, obviously our sort of, I suppose, our natural response, giving into our passions, would generally be one of anger, or at least of being upset at the prospect of these sacred images being, covered over, let alone the change of use, re the building to be used as a house of prayer for another religion. But sort of those initial feelings aside, what do you think should be an appropriate response for us as Christians?
with two hats on. First, as an art historian, it's an abomination. If they are going to, and I believe in the case of this particular church, when they were whitewashed, they were done delicately to preserve what was under them. I believe that's the case. So to cover these images of incredible importance to Western art, Western civilization, is a travesty. As a Christian, that church was lost a long time ago. And whether it's a museum or a mosque, I think at this point doesn't particularly matter. However, there is another. I mean, you can make a point that the present regime in Turkey is trying to clamp down and control or perhaps eradicate Christianity. That would be another wider perspective than just the particular turning of museums into mosques. It certainly is a provocative move. It causes great emotion and distress, of course, to Christians in the area and worldwide. But we do have to remember that it has ceased to be a Christian church for centuries. And with the fall of the Ottoman Emperor and Ataturk, there was a sort of a secularization of Turkey. Now, this seems to be changing and making it more an Islamic state. So, where does that stop? Of course, I mean, Hagia Sophia is the most famous church in the country, but there's also Ephesus and various churches there of particular importance to Christians around the world. It is a little disturbing, the fact that that it seems to be a targeting of the Christian faith. I read a thing there recently, in fact today, that recent. There's a Celtic cross in County Monaghan in Ireland, which is along the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, which has stood there for 1,000 years. There are a number of Muslim immigrants who have asked for it to be removed because it's offensive. And the county council has taken it up. I mean, that leaves me speechless. Absolutely speechless. If people are asking for respect of others' religion, but then turning around and asking for that, for 1,000 years it stood there, and they're offended because they have to walk past it every day.
That's really quite unconscionable. That.
Well, I mean, first of all, the argument is just breathtaking, and for the county council or corporation, as it's called there, to take it up as a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, if this sort of stuff continues, it calls for a fight back. And there is a sleeping, silent giant there waiting. And it'll be prodded enough times that it will wake.
I mean, there is certainly. I mean, as you know, I'm quite involved with multi-faith things here, and I mean, there is clearly a discrepancy. There is clearly a difference between Islamism and the way most Muslims practice Islam. However, and other commentators and observers recognize, Islamic scholars recognize this, that fundamentally, core to their religion is this notion that anyone who isn't a believer is infidel. and there is, I mean, I'm trying here, myself to word things carefully, and to be sensitive, but I think, and there are calls within the Islamic faith itself, to have a discussion about some of these fundamental ideas and precepts, and discuss how far they go and how far they should be observed or applied. And as somebody else said, part of the issue, as it were, for Islam is that it hasn't had anything like the Reformation, for example, that Christianity went through. They haven't had a cause or a provocation to relook and to study and rethink their theology and the application of their theology. And this is why, much to everybody's concern, but even in the even in non-fundamentalist mosques, even so, there will be people who will go, who did, for example, from the UK, who left the UK to travel to Syria and Iraq and join the Holy Crusade, to join the jihad, etc. In fact, there's an issue here at the moment. There was a young lady whose surname was Begum, who I think she was 15 or 16 when she left to Syria. She got married to one of the jihadist warriors. She got pregnant. The war is over in Syria, and she's sort of been left stranded because the Home Office withdrew her citizenship from the UK, leaving her, well, essentially without citizenship, which, according to international law, is a no-no. But under an ordinary circumstances, the Home Office would have otherwise argued that she received citizenship wherever. But the point being, of course, that there are now others too. There are other jihadi brides, some of them widows even, but who are now stranded in Syrian refugee camps with children, who want to return to the UK and return to their families, but are refused entry because of their having left the country to join a jihadi crusade. And as much as we don't want to fall into the trap of accusing all Muslims of condoning the violence and warlike tendencies of the Islamic fundamentalists, on the other hand, I've had really quite moderate Muslims affirm and explain to me that, strictly speaking, theologically, and according to the precepts of Sharia law, etc., according to their religion, the jihad is a kind of right in the attitudes and the approaches that they express. So, in other words, if you're say, for example, you're a young Muslim here in the UK, while your own congregation might be quite moderate and peace loving, if you fall in, if you, as so often young people can be, influenced by stronger voices, they can be persuaded fairly easily to the rightness so-called, of these theological ideals and fundamental precepts. So it's there is a situation there that does need to be addressed, and I think from what I know of Islamic colleagues here, there is a growing concern to try to address these issues within the community, but it's not easy. Not even it's not easy for them, because these, in part, because it's in part because of the kind of conceptual acrobatics they have to perform theologically, to get around some of these fundamental ideas. Now that said, the issue that what then may become certainly more of a pressing issue is perhaps a growing fundamentalism, or when I say fundamentalism, I don't necessarily mean Islamism, but a fundamentalism that may provoke some Muslim voices to the situation that you're describing there in Ireland. And I think part of what doesn't help here too are our politically correct policies that in many ways are weighted wrongly. Sometimes defying common sense and simple logic, but that can lend themselves to a scenario again like you've described. What I find really bizarre, what I find really strange, is how such a kind of conservative religion like Islam can use and manipulate liberal political attitudes for its own objects.
I don't know if it's Islam that's manipulating them, or they're just susceptible to want to embrace anything that's other. I mean, the liberal front, because it absolutely leaves me scratching my head when, the whole, I mean, it's very hard to lump everything together, but just for the sake of conversation, the liberal front, as purported by perhaps the US Democrats, certainly BLM, I mean, I won't include Antifa, they're a bit much, but that whole thrust of things, the Hollywood elite, the mainstream media, that they will continuously attack Christianity, but support Muslims and support Islam, and will downplay any sort of act of violence or atrocity. But of course, it goes against everything. The women's rights issues, the LGBT stuff. It makes
and civil rights and freedom
look like a theme park in comparison to the beliefs of even mainstream Islam on those issues, which are such the darling of the liberal movement. I mean, either they're just devoid of logic, or they just hate Western Christian culture so much, and they're so intent on changing it that they're blind to it. I can't explain it. I mean, normally I wouldn't be so blunt as this, but I really just can't get my head around it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, because we know, for example, that if a Christian congregation objected to the building, for example, of a mosque, let's say in the same road as their street, they would immediately be labelled as, and especially if they said, "Oh, because we find it offensive," they would straight away be labelled as racist, and probably as even as a right-wing extremist, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, you see, it sort of should show in the scenario in Ireland. Hopefully, I would think most, some people would think, well, okay, well, if we reverse this, what would we say about that? And that should show. It's like, for example, the inverted kind of racism that BLM advocates. It's my issue with BLM, and by BLM I mean capital BLM. Hashtag small lowercase BLM, Black Lives per se. Of course they matter. No issue with that at all. But the movement that capital BLM, I'm sorry, but they're racist. They're racist. Just because they're black doesn't mean to say that they're not racist. In their attitudes and in their slogans, and in what they're doing and what they're advocating politically. There's no, to my mind, they're just as racist as the white supremacists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's everything's on its head. What frustrates me, and I have to try to keep reminding myself, is stop trying to look for logic in this, because there is none.
No.
And as a person, I try to look at logic. I'll listen to anybody's argument, and if you're logical, I'll give you time. I may not end up agreeing with you, and I may, argue against you and have my own logical argument to refute you. But if you're logical, I'll give you the time of the day. You've got all the time in the world to talk with me. But this stuff is just topsy-turvy. There's nothing. There's nothing to it.
No.
Not one thing to another. And it's all just made up. And it's, it's as Ben Shapiro often says, my facts don't care about your feelings. And unfortunately, the other side doesn't get that.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I'm always disinclined to, what's the word? I'm always disinclined to lend any weight to suggestions of end times, simply because I hold with what our Saviour himself says, which is, focus rather on your salvation. Don't worry about the end of the world. You'll know when the end of the world is coming. just focus on your salvation. But I think there is clearly an increase in manifestation of the demonic, of chaos, of all the influence of the evil one. That can't be denied. And that's what we're seeing. This topsy-turvydom that we're experiencing. I mean, for example, just this whole COVID scenario. One of the frustrating things I find is the lack of consistency, and again, logic in the guidance and in the protocols. So for example, here at the moment, if we go into a shop, we're supposed to wear a face mask, but the shop staff who may be working an 8-hour shift, they don't have to wear a face mask. And yet we're told if we don't wear a face mask, we could spread, the virus within 15 minutes and infect umpteen number of people. Well, apply that logic then to the shop staff who are doing 8-hour shifts with no mask. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know.
None of it makes sense.
That immediately stuck out to me. As you know, I keep abreast of things at home, and I mean that really just left me scratching my head, saying that's no. I mean here and certainly, well, we don't do things nationally here, so we do it by state and even by city. But certainly in Chicago, all staff have to wear masks, and unless you're seated and actively engaged in drinking or eating, you have to have a mask. So when the waiter or waitress comes over to speak to you, you should actually have a mask on to speak back to them.
Yeah, it's the same in France.
But that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it follows the logic. If the premise is that wearing a mask prevents you spreading it to somebody else, so therefore, I mean, obviously you can't wear a mask when you're drinking your wine and eating your steak frites. But when anyone else is coming, it's logical. It's craziness that the staff don't have to wear a mask. Why? I mean, does nobody ask that question? Whatever SPAD comes up with this, the civil servant, does nobody just stop and say, hold on? I mean, we knew what's the character from Yes Minister, because he would have pointed it out.
Humphrey Appleby.
No,
or if he didn't, Bernard Woolley.
Yeah. Well, actually,
I think Bernard would have pointed it out, and then Sir Humphrey would have given a convoluted response as to why it's logical, even though it's illogical. Yeah. Well, now you see that was supposed to be an easy topic to begin with. We've already spoken for 45. Well, the best part of 40 minutes. Just on that headline. So I'm going to move us quickly on to the next. So, this is, of course, Vice President Biden, who is trying to claim the faith ticket in his presidential election bid, despite the fact that everybody knows, as nice as a person he may be, and as generally Christian a person he may be in his interactions with others, he is not a faithful Catholic when it comes to what the magisterium teaches, particularly with regard to his party's policies, which he endorses, concerning, for example, abortion. Now, I've already, and I make no apologies for it, I've already pointed out to Catholics, your side of the pond, that whatever one's personal misgivings may be about the current incumbent, he is more pro-life than Biden, and doesn't claim to be a Catholic, and so it isn't being a hypocrite, even if he's not completely as pro-life as some might think he is. By which I mean to say, and of course it's not my place to say, but by which I mean to say that Biden is not an acceptable candidate for Catholics to vote for.
I quite agree. It's deeply troubling. He said recently, for the past number of days, that when he was playing the faith card, that he was faith was deep within him, because he was instructed by nuns when he grew up, and they give him a great go in life and this moral compass. The first thing he wants to do, according to one of his interviews in the basement, is that he wants to rescind the Little Sisters of the Poor ruling about not having to pay for contraception and abortion for their employees. So, if he loves the nuns so much, what's the first thing he's going to do? And the other first thing he's going to do, so many firsts on his day of office, I hope he can remember them, that he wants to make abortion legal up until birth.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what faith you're from. That is not an acceptable proposition. I mean, a moral atheist couldn't talk themselves into that if any sort of logical moral compass whatsoever couldn't talk themselves into that point of view. I mean, 1 minute you're viable, the next minute you're not, just because you pass through the magical cervix. This is just nuts. And for a Catholic, you just can't do it.
No.
I'm sorry. I mean, I'd love to say otherwise. I'd love to say nice things that, well, we all have the freedom to vote. Of course you have the freedom to vote. You have the freedom to sin. You have the freedom to do good. You make these choices multiple times a day. So you have the freedom to do with what you are. But to say that you're voting as a Catholic and vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I'm sorry. You can't say you're a Catholic in doing that.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
I think, from an objective perspective, being outside the US, I remember, suggesting to people in the US last time, you were between a C and a hard place, Hillary Clinton or Trump. But quite frankly, that's the same scenario pertains. As odious a character as Donald Trump may be, as a person, I'm sorry, but we have a duty as Catholics to advocate for the unborn, and frankly, being pro-life does on this occasion trump everything else, and most especially because of the heinous late-term abortion, up to birth abortion that the Democrats are saying that they will institute. No, I don't understand how any Christian, to be honest, how can we say on the one hand that each and every one of us is purposed by God into existence, and then on the other hand turn around and say, but it's okay to kill unborn, defenseless children? It doesn't make sense.
There's no sense. And for those in the so-called mainstream churches that have made their bed and laid down with the abortion agenda, and I mean, they're from the Reformed tradition, who would advocate the Bible being the source of all truth. How you can take verses like, I've knit you together in your mother's womb, I've counted every hair in your head, how you can talk about the meeting of our Blessed Mother with Saint Elizabeth and the child leaping for joy and recognizing the Savior within her womb, and then turn around and advocate for abortion and call yourself a biblical Reformed Christian. No. You're an abomination to Christianity. It's absolutely the safest place in the world should be for a child in his mother's womb, and it's become the most dangerous. It's part of the every world and the agenda where, I mean, you're an absolute outsider if you're pro-life. I mean, to bring that up in a social context, to bring that up in the workplace may even cost you your job.
Yeah.
What has become of society? You know, the Democrats, when I moved to this country, which is not that long ago, I came here at the very end of 2002, the Democrats used to run on the ticket of the abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. That's gone. Absolutely gone. They want it up until birth. Up until birth.
It's horrific.
Where the hand is grasping against the... It's just absolutely horrific.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's unconscionable. I mean, it is heinous. It is evil.
Yeah. And the same people
it is evil.
The same people will talk about, you know, the evils of the Holocaust and this should never be repeated. Look what you're advocating, look what you're legislating for.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, I have some sympathy, you know, for those who have nothing but contempt for Donald Trump. You know, I don't think anyone.
I wish it wasn't Donald Trump, right? Because he's. I really wish the alternative wasn't Donald Trump. Honestly, I mean, it's because he's such a character that. Anyway, but he is the alternative. So you have a choice as a Catholic, either to vote for Donald Trump or not vote at all, or to write somebody in. Now the question is whether by not voting you enable the other, or, I mean, but that's your choice. To vote for Joe Biden is not a choice as a Catholic.
Yeah.
As a Catholic. Now, you can construe it all the way. You had Father James Martin, SJ, praying a prayer, a non-Christian prayer to some sort of deity at the Democrat National Congress, where he did mention the unborn. But you can go down his route, who would say that Joe Biden is a faithful Catholic. I'd like to see his worksheet, how he worked that out. You know, remember the old exams where they'd ask to see your worksheet? I really would like to see that, how he can work that out. And we haven't even talked about Kamala Harris, who will be the eventual president. She is so grotesquely anti-Catholic that it's... and that's just, I mean, forget about her being anti-Catholic. The other stuff that she's been up to in her career as prosecutor in California, about withholding evidence of people in death row that could prove their innocence. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, whether you like or don't like Mike Pence, he is a moral character, and it's up to whether you like him or don't like him. Now, most people hate him because he's a Christian. I think he made a mistake by leaving his Catholicism behind. But he is a moral character, and as far as I've seen, there's no evidence that he's deviated from his beliefs. He is a man of his convictions, and so that's your choice between those two candidates.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and if Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence do win in November, you better board.
Well, there'll be more. There'll be more of the civil unrest and deliberate divisiveness and polarization that the Democrats have promoted and provoked all the way through his present term.
Well, Michelle Obama said it in her speech. You haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, this is the thing, is that, you know, it's not the case that anyone else compared to Trump is reasonable. They're not.
No.
They're not. I mean, you know, and I'm sad to say, you know, that you know, what does that tell you about the state of contemporary politics in America today? That you know, you can't put up a decent opponent who
Right.
is, you know, a person of reasonable mind and intellect and ability. Instead, you put up these caricatures of people like Biden and Harris. You know, one of the things that has astonished me during this Trump term is the number of supposedly brighter and more experienced politicians who have been unable at every turn to counter or defeat Trump. You know, and have had to, you know, resort to basically stalling tactics as and where they can, but who seem to be unable to defeat him on with arguments.
Yeah, no, it's I go back to when I was a child being taught about different systems of government in history class, and I am not advocating for monarchy. I'm not advocating for democracy. I'm just holding this up as an example, a very rudimentary. If everything were in a perfect world, this would be the case. That a monarch answers to God, from which he or she is divinely anointed. And he or she has to make answer to God by how they reigned and how they looked after their people. A president or a prime minister makes answer to the people, for which he will lie and cheat and tell them everything they want to hear in order to retain power. I'm not saying there have not been righteous prime ministers and presidents. I am not saying there haven't been corrupt and awful monarchs. We all know that is the case. But if you look at the premise for them having power, it's very different.
Mm.
But anyway, this is the system in which we live. And we're talking about voting as Catholics. I want to make it quite clear. I'm, as regards also talking about the Muslims and asking for symbols to be removed and everything else. I, for one, I'm quite okay living with a secular Western society. I wish it were different, but I can live with it. However, there are certain lines in the sand, and the killing of children is one. But I'm quite open to live under their other rules, which I mightn't be too comfortable with, or which I wish they were different. And I will give respect to the state and to the duly elected representatives. But I, as a human being, I, as a person of faith, have to make certain decisions. And for one, is the killing of children.
Yeah.
I can't. There's nothing can convince me otherwise. And there's no other. People will say, well, there's other issues. Think about healthcare. Think about. I can't get over the death of one human being. Nothing goes beyond that for me. Nothing gives me another. It's the thing. Was it right? Would it be right to shoot Hitler? Well, of course it wouldn't be right to shoot Hitler. You'd be committing murder, transgression of the Ten Commandments. You condemn your soul to hell. The whole thing's a mess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I take some solace from the fact that I'm not an American citizen and therefore don't face this this dilemma. But by no means are things more rosy, as it were, on this side of the pond. um, the
Well,
imposition of abortion in Northern Ireland, for example, and now using that to allow for late-term abortions, etc., across the UK. These are evil times. These are evil times, and I agree with you that whereas there are other issues, but fundamentally, if you haven't got, if the sanctity of life is not that is, if you haven't got that, to be frank, you haven't got anything else. There is no point to anything else.
Yeah.
And if you don't hold with the sanctity of life, then there is no point to anything else, and it really makes no difference. The sanctity of human life has to come first, and of course for us, theologically and philosophically, because nothing makes sense without the gift of human life. That's why we're here. That's why we exist at all. You take that away, it doesn't really matter what other issues or systems of ideologies and the rest of it you may have. They mean nothing if human life means nothing. And sadly, this is the situation today, not just in the US, but over here in Europe as well. Generally speaking, the left, particularly, and of course, increasing among among the liberals, is this culture of death, of euthanasia, of
it is the culture of death. I mean, John Paul II was very right in that. We've embraced a culture of death. And it all started in the 1920s when every major Christian faith, certainly in English-speaking Europe, was against contraception. But then that changed. And once you have the notion of contraception, then, I mean, it just, and they were right. It opened a complete Pandora's box to where we're at the minute, where you can have abortion up until birth. And with that, if life is expendable at one end, it follows that it should be, if you've no further purpose for society, then
euthanasia, assisted suicide.
Yeah, you're out at the other end too. And unfortunately, certainly in Great Britain, you have no pro-life party. Northern Ireland, you still have one, but in Great Britain, there's no alternative. I mean, they're all in for it. You have one or two voices, and what's the name of the peer who speaks eloquently about disabled and Down syndrome abortions? Do you know the? He's disabled himself.
He's disabled himself. Yeah, it's a strange name. It's not an easily memorable name. I know the chap you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a voice crying in the wilderness.
Yeah,
and if you notice, nobody really argues against him. They just silence.
No, because they can't.
Because they can't.
They can't.
No.
They can't argue against him.
And that sort of sums it all up, doesn't it? The very fact that they can't even carry. If they're so convicted, they could argue against it, but they're not. It's just because there's no logic again.
Yeah. No. And this is the thing, and yeah. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's if life isn't sacred, then nothing else matters. It really doesn't. And this is the irony of so many of the counter arguments, because ultimately, what does it mean to be alive? You want all these rights and privileges and everything else to live, but you don't appreciate what life is. You don't appreciate what living is.
And to the Christian, that's the crux of it all. It's that moment of creation. Every human being is created and in need of salvation. And that's why it's so precious to us. That's why we value every human life. It's that it's created in the image and likeness of God and in need of salvation. And that to bring that life home and to make it full, that it may enjoy the beatific vision, that's why we fight for what we believe, because it is so incredibly precious. More precious than anything the world can offer. Any sort of enjoyment, infatuation, anything the world can offer up. It has nothing but the great prize, as the apostle writes. And that's why we care. That's what motivates us. That's what makes us gammon-faced old men. Because it's too important. It's too important. And there is a righteous rage against the machine. And the machine right now is powerful. It's running in all cylinders. And but it's just a machine. It's not a deity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, there are two more headlines.
Oh no, God, no!
but I'm conscious of the fact that we've taken over an hour to discuss the first two. So perhaps we ought to leave those for another time.
Right.
So
unless we do a speed round in 30 seconds or less.
we could. We could answer. We could do these very quickly. Let's try that. So here we are. So Bishop ordered to repay thousands of dollars to diocese. So this is the retired Bishop Michael Bransfield, who was formerly the diocesan bishop of, bear with me, Wheeling Charleston, who, during his tenure, where is it? Oh, here. During his tenure, managed to spend more than £4.6 million on the bishop's residence, $2.4 million on travel, and $350,000 on financial gifts to other clergymen, including some who later investigated him. He's been ordered by the Congregation of Bishops, by the Vatican, to repay the Diocese of Wheeling Charleston the sum of $441,000. Bearing in mind that he's apparently paid it, and I don't know how, especially when he receives a retirement stipend of just $2,250 per month.
All right, this is a speed round.
Yeah.
He should never have done it in the first place, and the very fact that he has the amount of money to repay in the second place makes it a scandal. And who knows where his source of income is coming from? Ding.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think we can do the next one just as quickly. So this is the Archbishop of Hamburg, Stefan Hess, has called for an open debate on the ordination of women at the upcoming German Bishops' Synod? Well, yeah. No.
I've one word, and it is, why am I not surprised by the first word in that headline?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why do they want it so much? The Germans in particular.
I don't know. More money than sense.
Well, I think
right.
So there, you've hit it again.
Yeah. I mean, certainly that's it's a subject, it's a topic we could talk about certainly another time, because
this one could be.
I think people deserve a good discussion on the topic.
I agree.
But as a quick fire round, simply no. Is the answer to that. Well, bless you all for watching. This was Old Romans Unscripted. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, Brother Stanislaus from Detroit will be able to join us again. He wasn't able to this week because he's had car problems. So, in fact, he was manfully teaching himself how to fix his car today.
If you're going to have car problems, Detroit's the best place. It is the home of the motor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Though of course he's not Detroit born, so he doesn't have the automatic gene, perhaps. So he was spending time with a how-to manual, and apologised that he couldn't join us this week. And I having already prevailed upon and received much generosity from Father Thomas to broadcast the daily mass for Old Roman TV. I didn't even ask him today if he was going to join us.
I believe
for the program
this weekend. Yeah,
I think he's working. Yeah, so bless you all of those who have watched throughout. I hope it was interesting for you. Thank you for those of you who've commented. We did notice the comments, even if we didn't directly respond to them. Some of them we did. By all means, if you have any questions, feel free to comment after the show. The comments will still be there. You can still comment after the show. And if there are any questions or anything there, then we may answer them next week. Meanwhile, as usual, I'll ask Bishop Kelly if he'd be kind enough to give us his blessing.
The Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
May the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost descend upon you and remain with you forever. Amen.
Amen. God bless you all. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And just as a reminder, if you know of anyone who is vocationally discerning, bring their attention to the vocational conference. They can express interest via www.celsey.org.